Welcome back to the Allegheny Northern in N scale, and today we are doing viewer request, which was locomotive maintenance. And what started this was I was talking about having to break in a new locomotive and the process that I go through for that, and people were asking, well, what do you do for maintenance? Okay, so this is what I do for maintenance. It's not really aggressive or detailed in any way, but it also follows into our tinkering video. And what we did for that is, understanding how to take care of your equipment and, what you need to do for just general maintenance. So what I have in front of you is I've got a model from Atlas. I have one from Cato, and I have one from Ather. And the reason I'm showing you three different manufacturers is, one, these are three different manufacturers of locomotives that I've pulled off my layout for service. And so they've been sitting back here ready to do work. Now, before I get too far into this, something that I like to do is, you can see that there is dust on the top. So before I'm done, I'm just going to take a very soft brush and I'm going to brush off all the dust. And that includes anything that's down here. These models have been sitting kind of idle in the layout. So as part of maintenance, I will just take a brush and clean these things off, if they're dirty, and especially before I do any kind of weathering to these, which that's why they're off the layout. They're getting weathered and detailed. So just taking a very soft brush. Be mindful of any kind of, for this Atherin, there's not really much separately applied details, right? There's the horn up above, but nothing else. And all I want to do is brush that dust off. So that's just, that's more aesthetics than anything. But you also don't want that dust getting into your locomotive. So dust your locomotives. And I also want to show you all three of these because the shells come off in different ways. So you need to look at your locomotive manufacturers. They'll give you like an expanded view of your model, and you need to look at that as it shows you how they go together. So if you're mechanically inclined, you can probably figure it out without doing any damage. If you're not mechanically inclined, then I highly suggest you read that and see how that comes apart. If you can't read the I call them the blueprints of the locomotive as to how they're put together, then go to a hobby shop and get help. Because it is very easy, especially on something like a scale trains or something that somebody's detailed. It's very easy to break pieces off, especially if you don't know what you're doing. So take care to take your model apart. Now, first thing that I'll notice is here on this Atlas, you got to check because sometimes the shell is held on by the couplers. So if there's a screw down here, I can almost guarantee you that the screw that holds this coupler in place is also going to be integral with holding the shell in place. So the coupler slides in, the shell slides over the top. That's all got to come apart. Something like the Katos, they have this little bar on the end. The coupler doesn't really play into it, and these ones you can usually get the shell apart. And if you can't, it's a very simple process of getting underneath it. And what you're going to need for that is a very small flat screwdriver. You may need two, and you're just going to want to gently pry up underneath the shell. Sometimes you can, depending on how they're put together, you can kind of bounce them free. I don't find that technique to be very useful in most cases, but if you can just get under here, kind of pry the shell apart, and then kind of hold it there, you'll be able to sort of wiggle this thing loose and see it'll just come off just like that. Whether you have DCC or DCC, either DC or DCC, you're going to have some kind of a board in here. So I've got a digital board in here. If you have the original model, then you don't have the digital board. You have a just a light board for DC operation. If you installed sound in it, then you've got some extra wires going to those. If you added lights, you've got extra parts and pieces. But you got your shell off, and you can see that the Katos are fairly well encased, which is a pain in the ass, but it is what it is, and I'll show you how to handle that. If you come out, obviously the screws are small. You want to be very careful that you don't misplace the screws. I like to use a pair of tweezers to reach in there and grab that, and then either set it aside, set it in something, just get it out of the way, but make sure you don't lose those screws, because it's not like something you can just run down to the hardware store and grab another one. The other thing that you want to be careful of too is these models are not terribly detailed, so it's a little easier to kind of roughhouse with them. I'm not going to knock anything off, but if you have a more detailed model, or if you need to put the model down, they make foam cradles, or they make just foam, just something that you can set this model into. And that's going to go a long way in helping to preserve details, not scratch paints, and stuff like that. So you don't want to work directly on a hard surface, because you will inevitably damage a horn or some other detail. Grab irons are probably one of the easiest things to break, especially in N scale, because they're fragile. And in this case, I forgot a coupler. This coupler fell apart, which is okay, because I'm probably going to replace it with a micro trains. It's not. But once that's off, usually these shells come off. Sometimes the fuel tank comes off too. It's kind of a pain. But usually these ones come off a little bit easier without any prying. Yep, there it is. Okay, so I accidentally removed the shell from two Atlas models. You may have seen that in the last scene, and I realized it when I was looking at the two of those things, and they looked exactly the same. So this is an Athearn model, and you can see that, basically the same. You've got some access to the oil points here, but you don't have access to just barely have access to that gearbox. So my point in showing you all of this was that you basically have a very similar shell, right? No matter how it comes off. Sometimes you need to remove the couplers, sometimes you don't. Actually, on all four of these models, I did not need to remove the couplers. So even that one that I showed you, I didn't need to remove it. There are some that you do, and without doing that, this shell it's not going to come off. It's like integral to the whole thing. In this case, didn't need to do it, so I showed you how to do it. But if you have a model that is like that, then go ahead and simply remove that shell and those coupling boxes. Now, okay, so what we're going to do at this point here is we're going to start with the easy one. Take a look in here and see what the locomotive looks like. See if you can see oil on the gears. And you'll know that there's oil on the gears because you'll see a sheen or a slight shine. And in my case, I don't really see much of anything on this locomotive. Maybe a little bit, but it's kind of old. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to take this. This is a grease, and it's a Labelle grease, and you can use any manufacturer's grease. I think this is what you're going to find that is most readily available. And you're going to take this and apply it. I put a little dab on each of the gears. And when I say a little dab, I do mean just a little dab. That's all I'm going to do right there. Both sides of the model. Like so. And if you're sloppy, like I am here, you're going to want to clean that up, because that will get all of everything. It'll pick up extra scenery material. It'll just be gross. So we want to clean that up. Then I'm going to come up here on top, and I'm going to put just a small dab across the worm gear on either side. Okay, that's it for grease. Now I'm going to take an oil, not a grease, an oil, and I want to hit the bearing points. So that's the parts where something is rotating through something else, okay? And they give you access into here, and they give you this little needle so that you can get the oil. Right in there, you'll see where the contact point is. And once again, a little goes a very long way. So I don't want to over grease anything. And then even on your worm gears in here, it's a little hard to see, but where the worm gear sits into the frame, there is a contact point. I like to hit that with just a small amount of oil as well. And that's it. Those are your moving parts. That's what gets oiled. That is the major part of what we're going to do. So at this point, I'm going to take my shell. I'm going to throw it back onto my locomotive. Once it's set, I make sure that all of my brass contact points are in good working order. These ones are, but I would adjust them if they weren't making contact. So I'm looking right here. They don't always require something. If you see that you've got an old contact and it's got, black buildup or any kind of dirt or whatnot, then a simple Q-tip with a very small amount of an electronics cleaner in there will do the trick. These are in good shape, so I'm not going to bother wasting time doing that. Same here. This model, you can see it a little bit clearer because I didn't put the shell on. But I want to look and make sure that my brass contacts, this was a little bit bent, but you can see that it's still making contact right here. That's where it's supposed to. And then if you just pull this up here, and I don't want to bend it, but I just want to get it out of the way so I can look at it. You can see that it's not dirty. If it was dirty, once again, I would need to clean it, but it's not, so I'm not going to. I'm not going to do an extra step that I don't need to. Don't do work you don't have to, because if it's working and you do something, then you're probably going to screw it up. But then I'm going to repeat that oiling process in here just the same. So since that's the same model, I'm not going to bother. I'm showing you how that works. Now, here we go. This is I believe this is the Kato unit. And, looking at this, it's got the same kind of brass contacts. They're not hardwired points. So I know that this model is good. But once again, if I was having any electrical pickup issues, those are where I would check first. Be very careful. Don't touch your decoder unless you absolutely have to. If you have a light board, it's not really anything in there that you got to worry about. Now, oiling these babies. I do like to do the process of getting in here and getting on these bearings at the motor. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, or I can't really get that in there. You can take these apart and really, grease these things up. I don't see any need to do that. Others may argue with me. I don't see any need to do that very often, because the main part that you're going to want to grease, and I can see that these are dry. I don't know how well that light's coming across there, but you can see there's not much. You've got a plastic shine, but you don't have an oil shine. So I'm going to there's a lot of exposed gears here. I'm going to hit all of these, and I'm going to run this one so that the grease gets in there, but I'm not going to take it apart. If, for some reason, you feel so inclined, or your model's old, or it's making a lot of noise, screws on either side, you can pull those out. Your decoder will fall out, obviously, because you know that because you put the decoder in probably. You've got to make sure you do the cap and tape to make sure that you don't have contact where you don't need it. Then you just need to make sure your brass tabs here touch the motor in the correct location. If you don't have a drop-in, if you hardwired it, your setup may look different. It just depends on what you have. But you don't have access to the gears, so I put a little extra grease down here because you got a little more exposed gear. That's good enough for me. You're going to find out that works just fine, and you don't need to do anything else. Once again, if it's an older model, that might be a different story, and you may have to take it apart and oil everything. But in general, I find that is not required. So once again, we're going to come in here. This gives you a nice open spot where you can see right to that point where the flywheel is at. So I want to go ahead and just grease that. It's very important to make sure that the lubrication that you're using is a plastics compatible, because surprise, surprise, it's touching plastic. So don't, if it's not a hobby oil, I wouldn't recommend it. And I'm just looking here to see if, I'm actually not going to grease this one because this actually looks pretty good in here. So I'm going to leave this one alone. And usually you don't have a million of these things uncovered at the same time, so you don't have to necessarily look to see which locomotive you're holding. but just make sure that you get everything put back together correctly. So, okay, now with our locomotive on the layout, basically all we want to do is get that grease and oil coated over everything we just did. So this is the real tough part of the hobby. You're actually going to have to run your trains. Now, for this, I recommend the old school break-in method, which is half an hour forward, half an hour backwards, just to get everything nice and coated. And let me show you here just a second what this looks like. See, you're going to see that a lot of that grease and oil that was, we had that dab on there. Well, it's gone, right? That's because it is on the model and it is spinning around and around. So that's what we want. That's what we want to see, and we don't want to see that oil necessarily. And if you are seeing it, well, then you might have put too much on there. So after half an hour, if it's over greased, you're going to know about it. The model just will not perform very well, especially over time, because that extra oil is going to it's going to build up gunk, and that's not what you're looking for. So we're going to let these things run around here for just a bit, but you can see that I don't have excessive grease. You see that right there? It's like we're going to want to wipe that off before we send it too far over the layout, because it picked up some stuff. So the next step here that we're going to want to do is simple cleaning. Now, what I want to do is I want to show you some new locomotives here, right? So this is brand new from Scale Trains. You see how there's a slight sheen there, but it's not gloppy? That's how your oil should look. After your locomotive is broken in, or after it's cleaned, or whatever, you should have a look that looks just like that. You should see the oil, but it shouldn't be excessive. What you're going to want to do next, if you have Tidy Track, this is a great little tool. It does have contacts here, so if you are on a straight section of track, you can actually just lay this right on the track. If you're not, then you can use the alligator clips and tie it in there. Then grab your locomotive. And here, we'll set it up over here so you can see what I'm doing. And then turn your throttle up. And hold your locomotive in place. Now, I promise you that it is trying to drive, even though you can't see it. And it's going to try to, it's going to fight you a little bit here. But you can clean your wheels. So that's the next thing I like to do. If I let it go there, it'll try to drive away from me. But I want those wheels to spin. So I just hold it in place so that the wheels spin. And then I let it smack into the other side, and I'll drive it the other way. Just kind of hold it in place, and that will clean your wheels. If you find that you've got an older model, or you've got some gunk on those wheels that are not coming off, do not use more abrasive pads. I clean my wheels the same way as I clean my track. I use a contact cleaner. This is one from CRC. But you can find one at your local either hobby shop or at your home improvement store. Once again, plastic safe. Make sure it's plastic safe. If it's not and it destroys the plastic of your trucks, you are not going to have a real good time with your locomotive. So after you've done your basic dusting, after you've got your grease and oil on there, make sure it's on the tracks before you try to send it over turnover, and let her run. Get that grease and oil coating that locomotive, and make sure that it's all good. If your locomotive's running quiet, locomotive's running smooth, your maintenance is done. Okay, I can almost hear the complaining now. I don't have a Tidy Track system. My wife won't let me spend any more money on train stuff this month. How am I going to clean my locomotives? Well, go up and go to the kitchen and get a paper towel. And then you're going to take that paper towel and you're going to spray your contact cleaner right on the paper towel, just like that. I don't have contact cleaner. Okay, then that's fine. Use whatever you're using to clean the track. You probably have a solution. I know some folks like to use alcohol. Whatever it is, I don't care what you're using. Track cleaning solution. Turn the power. There we go. All right. Hold your locomotive on a track, both sets of wheels, and without causing too much friction, too much grinding, let the locomotive ride over that cleaner. When you're done with one side, go ahead, flip it over, and do the other side. I'm lightly holding it. I'm kind of letting it rock back and forth. I'm not applying any pressure. Just the same as I was with the tidy track. And when you are done, if there's any dirt on there, you'll see it right there on the paper towel. And when you're done with that, you can look at your locomotive's wheels. See they're nice and shiny clean. This will take off any chemical blackening that either you or the factory applied, so you do need to put that back on. But you'll get a nice smooth running locomotive. And if it did slow speed before, it should do it again. Okay. So you have options on how you want to clean your locomotive. Either one of those methods will work. Folks, that's it. I'd like to tell you there's more to it. I'd like to tell you it's more complicated. I'd like to tell you that you're going to have to do a whole lot of stuff, but quite frankly, you don't. That is all the maintenance that it takes to keep these locomotives running. Now, some other things that you may want to do, and it's the same as your rolling stock, is if you want to take out your microtrains gauge and you'll want to check the couplers to make sure that they're in good working order, good height, make sure that they clear as far as their little trip pins go, and stuff like that. I encourage all of that. That's always a good practice to do. It's going to save you a lot of hassle. And then, the next thing that you might want to do is take a look at the details of the locomotive. So if you're looking at your locomotives and you realize you're missing some air hoses, you're missing sunshades, things that fall off during operating sessions and inevitably get lost. It's not a bad time to look at those items and make those cosmetic repairs to your locomotive as well. If you are a DCC person and you need to upload sound files, or if you need to, change the address or anything like that, this is the time that I would do that. But in general, typically once you do that and once you've got it set, you don't really need to touch it again. So you really don't need to do a whole lot else. The important thing is that you make sure that you keep your locomotives nice and greased. And you'll notice that if they were running loud, and they chances are a little bit of oil goes a long way in making them quiet. That's just because the parts aren't rubbing against each other the way that they were. If you see that there's excess grease, like you can see in there, after running it for a half hour or so forwards and backwards, go ahead in there and clean that out with something that at the end of a paper towel is probably best. You want to avoid like Q-tips and stuff like that, because the little fibers will get inside and then that just makes a mess too. You want to avoid over-greasing, because over-greasing will cause gunk to build up, and you don't want to build up gunk inside your motors or inside your gear, and you don't want it picking up scenery material. So, it's really not that difficult to get these things clean, to keep things moving. It's just something that you should do. Depending on how often you run your locomotives will depend on how often you need to do that. If the locomotive sounds like it's getting loud, sounds like it's getting kind of, shaking or whatnot, then you may need to take it off the track sooner, maybe clear out some old grease, and that's just a matter of taking the trucks apart. I try to avoid that at all costs, because when you take things apart, sometimes they just don't go back, they just don't fit right. But if you're desperate, that's something you can do. These things all come apart. They come apart pretty much the same way, but once again, read your instructions on how those go apart. It's going to change from each locomotive, and it's going to change between scales. In N scale, obviously everything's tiny, so you have a little bit more trouble. So this video was not intended to troubleshoot every issue that you're going to have with your locomotive. It was more like, this is what I do pretty much once a year to my locomotives, just to keep them running nice. Okay, that's just to keep them running nice, keep them running smooth. There's a lot of times that I'll flip these locomotives over and I'll see that they're coated in oil still, and I will do nothing to them. But, if they've been running around the layout a lot or they've been sitting for a long time, they might need refreshed, especially if you hear some noise. So I know that was kind of a quick breakdown. There's some stuff we didn't talk about that maybe, is something you're having an issue with. If you're having an issue with your locomotive, leave your comment down below. I might be able to try to help you out just by talking you through it. But in general, these quick little maintenance tips will help keep your little tiny machines running nice and smooth and nice and quiet.